Welcome, folks, to our presentation today. With many of you looking at your options for new ERP technology, Arctic IT, in partnership with Sparkrock, is proud to host this conversation with you today. Our presenters today are Matt Borkowski of Arctic IT and Russell Parr, Channel Sales Manager of Sparkrock. Many of you on the call are familiar with Matt as he serves as our subject matter expert on ERP solutions for tribes and nonprofits. We will be joined today by special guest James Fall, co-founder and chief technology officer of Sparkrock. James will demonstrate the unique features of Sparkrock 365. So with that, I'll pass the presentation over to Matt.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to talk to you more about where GP's at and kind of that next Dynamics ERP for tribes and our nonprofit customers. So with that, our presentation today will be starting with the Dynamics GP roadmap, kind of where we're at, where things are looking going forward with Dynamics GP, the path forward from there, and excited to introduce and talk to you more about Sparkrock 365 for Dynamics 365 Business Central, give you a nice little sneak peek of that solution, and hopefully with a few minutes for some Q&A at the end. So again, we're grateful for you joining us today, and I'm excited to dive in. So as I've built my career really on Dynamics GP implementations and consulting over the last 15 years, obviously it's very important to me kind of where Dynamics GP is going for our clients and just for the future of users of Dynamics GP. So this should be a somewhat familiar slide for those of you that have been to GP conferences over the year. And this is kind of the current view of the Dynamics GP roadmap. Dynamics GP 2015 is now, as of April, out of support by Microsoft, so there will no longer be any updates for Dynamics GP. So if you are still Dynamics GP 2015, excuse me, so if you are still on that version, we'll need to chat about what's next and getting you on a supported Dynamics solution. And as you kind of look through this, starting with Dynamics GP 2016, through to what is now called Dynamics GP, you can see that a lot of the development, a lot of the enhancements are still rolling out. Some of that involves trying to make workflows a little bit more useful, as we've seen in GP 2018, optimizing just some of the core functions of HR, purchasing and sales in particular in recent versions. They're just giving us adding new views for some of the inquiries. For instance, some fields which you used to have to drill down onto are now on the first inquiry field. A few different reports and other things in that. But you'll also see this idea of Power BI originally in 2016, all the way through what they're now calling Intelligent Edge, which is that more and more trying to give some dashboard functionalities with Power BI integrated with Dynamics GP. So as things go forward, we're continuing to see that kind of be Microsoft's focus in what they are enhancing in future versions of Dynamics GP. But as of this past year, last October, the latest version of GP, you see I have in quotes here for GP 2019, because Microsoft has moved away from using years in the numbering of the solution. So it is technically called GP 18.2 right now, and it's just called Dynamics GP going forward. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But it is that idea, it's a big switch from what we've gotten used to for years of GP, which is every couple of years, a major version releases, and then that version is supported for 5 years. So that current landscape is with that GP 2019 or 18.2 is because Microsoft moved it from the traditional software lifecycle policy that we've gotten used to with GP, which is when a major version releases, that version is supported for 5 years. So that's why this year, 2020, Dynamics GP 2015 is no longer supported. Next year, GP 2016 becomes end of life. 2018 is supported through 2023. That sort of 5-year life cycle is no longer in play with this latest version of Dynamics GP. It moves to the modern lifecycle policy. What's nice about that is is that with that, Microsoft has said, we're not going to put out these major versions, which are large upgrade projects and those things going forward, is that twice a year, there'll be a service pack put out. And as long as you're keeping updated with service packs, you're staying on a modern supported solution, version of GP. So that will stay up to date. And as of right now, they have a projected schedule for those twice a year service pack updates through the November, December timeframe of 2024. But what's key to notice with this lifecycle policy is that while it has their projected schedule for when they're releasing those updates, they are not guaranteeing that they will. It is not a requirement. That is their projected schedule, and that the lifecycle policy has a 12-month end of life notification. So what that means under this new policy is that Microsoft is saying that, look, if we decide to stop supporting GP altogether, we'll give you at least 12 months notice. And as for those of you that have implemented ERP solutions in the past, 12 months is not a lot of time to have to do your research, get a system implemented, migrate your data, train your team on how to use it. And so that is a big shift with that modern lifecycle policy. So in general, it's not much has changed in the past 2 years with GP. Microsoft has stopped paying their own salespeople commissions on it. So if you were to call Microsoft and ask them about ERP solutions, they won't even mention GP anymore. Microsoft isn't selling it directly. They're not incentivizing their people anymore. They have shifted completely to Dynamics 365. And a lot of that is just it's an aging system. The web client, they've tried to really make it usable. For those of you that have tried, you realize it's really not that usable. And there's a lot of third-party cloud options for, look, we don't want to maintain our own GP anymore, so maybe we'll put it on someone else's server. While there are options for that, it is definitely not a true cloud system. And just in general, they are shrinking their GP team. So fewer and fewer developers and staff at Microsoft is geared towards Dynamics GP. It really is D365 as the way forward. But so why is Microsoft doing that? Why not just continue to enhance GP, which they are, but it is a legacy solution. And with that meaning just the way that the underlying code base, that dexterity system that it's based on, really is not made to be an integrated solution. It's just not how the platform was designed, because it was designed originally 20 years ago, right? And so that leaves your team siloed. If you're not in the finance team, it's really hard to kind of make use of the system. Some of your procurement folks might be in there, or HR and payroll folks, but it really leaves that data silo, trying to report on that or get it properly in that. So that leaves duplicate data where you're having to enter information multiple times in multiple places. There's a lot of manual processes. You're running pieces of paper around to get signatures on there, because if you're trying to enhance the functionality that the GP has, you're having to bolt on a lot of different third parties, and there's some great ones out there, but that leaves continued additional silos of information, siloed processes, and just insufficient tracking. That ability of knowing exactly who did what and when, who approved it at what times, you're having to check 5-6 different places to figure that out. And that just increases your security footprint in general, which leaves more to try to secure in multiple systems with different, all kinds of different things, making it much more difficult to centrally manage, track, and secure your solutions. So Microsoft knew they needed a way forward from that, because they weren't going to be able to just enhance GP to be able to provide what you need in a modern solution. And so what is that path forward? You've heard us talk about Dynamics 365 a number of times probably as of this point. So at its core, it's important to look at, again, why is this the path forward? And just kind of comparing a legacy Dynamics GP type system with a cloud solution. In particular, right now during this pandemic, as more and more people have tried to make use of legacy systems from home or on the go, and just the restrictions that provides. I mean, you really are vulnerable to site-related issues. When you can't be at the office, what does that mean? If there are natural disasters or pandemic power outages, at the office, or what does that leave you with? And you really are vulnerable. the legacy systems, that idea of business continuity has never been more at the forefront for our business leaders as it is right now. And so being able to achieve some of these things, like true data backup and recovery, with redundant systems across different geographic locales, is doable with a legacy system, but it's very complicated, very expensive, and requires very, very sharp IT folks with the budget to be able to try to manage this level of complexity and infrastructure to give you that true business continuity. So then when you're trying to connect from home using traditional VPN access, for those of you that have tried to use GP across VPN, unless you have a real good terminal server already set up, which is great, but we've had folks that haven't been able to process payroll without going into the office, just because that VPN, more traditional legacy type connectivity, just wasn't supporting it well enough, and it's very expensive to maintain all of that on a at scale with a legacy on-premise system. And so the cloud base of that, where you're using Microsoft systems, everything on their cloud, all of that sort of business continuity is built in to using a Microsoft cloud solution with that backup and recovery functionality being automated and how that's done. Being able to access it from anywhere, whether it's via a phone, from a mobile browser, that sort of thing. It really brings down to that key vulnerability being in just losing your internet connection. If you don't have your internet connection, well, you can't connect to it, and that is that key vulnerability. But if you're trying to access from home anyways in a situation like this with a legacy system, you're still going to be subject to, if your internet goes down, you can't connect to it. And it's not only just your at-home internet connection, but also the internet connection to the office. So you're now having to deal with two separate connections that, if there's issues, you can't access. With the cloud system, it reduces those potential setbacks to just one. So with that kind of reintroduction of how a cloud system, especially in the current climate, can really be a benefit, that Microsoft's cloud Dynamics solution, as you all have heard, is Dynamics 365. And that's really trying to integrate multiple types of functionality that are typically in completely separate applications that don't talk well with each other without some sort of middleware that's controlling that, like integration manager, export imports, as many of our GP customers have used for years. It really gives you that one system to optimize the performance of your entire business. So we're talking about sales, marketing, customer service. For some of us in that customer service, that's our tribal members, our enrollment solution, our tenants living in our buildings, our in our tribal housing, whatever that customer, whether they're a paying customer or a member that you're servicing, that sort of thing, being able to track the communication and things around that contact management, case management type functionality with Dynamics 365. Then you've got your finance and supply chain management, your core ERP functionalities, and your enterprise retail, point of sale, e-commerce type functionality, all available within that Dynamics 365 platform. So they're separate apps of Dynamics 365 that share what's called the common data model. That means that a customer or a client in one system can be that same client in the other systems. You update an address, it's available everywhere that contact is used. Just that core platform data model, data structure, the CDS, Common Data Service, as you'll commonly hear it right now, it just makes that available throughout the applications on Dynamics 365. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the Microsoft 365 business apps, formerly known as Office 365, Power BI, and the rest of that Microsoft stack. But most specifically today, we're talking about the ERP side of Dynamics 365. And for most Dynamics GP users, that next step, the logical step into Dynamics 365, the migration into that next ERP is Business Central. With Business Central is that mid-market offering from Dynamics 365, and it provides a solid core of functionality. You're delivering primarily financial and supply chain management functionality. And of course, giving you the world-class database structure, security, manageability, administration that you would expect from a Microsoft cloud application. You're built on that Microsoft Azure and controlled for the IT folks out there, access controlled via Azure Active Directory. But for nonprofit and tribal organizations who require functionality specific to their needs, we had to look beyond the core Business Central solution. Yeah, so Arctic IT, myself included in that, we spent months researching and meeting with potential solution providers who could help us continue to bring the best technology to our tribal and nonprofit customers like you all, who are at the core of our business. Yeah, that is what we do, that is who we work for, and we're proud of that. So we needed to look, how do we continue to bring that best technology to our customers? And so out of that time, looking into partnerships with other solutions, we're really happy to announce our partnership with Sparkrock. The Sparkrock 365 solution is built and powered by Business Central on the Dynamics 365 platform. So it's still all part of that ecosystem. And Sparkrock brings the modern technology to meet the fund accounting and procurement functionality with available HR and payroll modules that is an ideal for nonprofits and tribal government organizations that we cannot meet with Dynamics 365 at its core alone. So we are very happy and excited to be a Sparkrock 365 partner and to have that be the way forward for our customers. Now, continuing that conversation elsewhere with Sparkrock 365, you're not limited again to that using the system just at the office. You're being able to take the solution with you on the go. Whether you have to work from home in a situation like this, or whether you're traveling for work, or you're out of the office. And if you are allowed to, because it's completely secured with Azure Active Directory, where and when you can log into the system and all that still. But you can access it via very feature-rich mobile apps, whether they're on your phones, whether they're on tablets, using laptops through browsers. You have full access to that information. You're not limited to the constraints of your office any longer. And with Microsoft or Office 365 business applications, the ability to interact with that while you're in your email, or while you're in Excel or Word, not having to juggle multiple applications, export, import, and do all that, where you can literally, right from inside of Outlook, get an email from Arctic IT with an invoice attached, and right from there route that for approval. You don't have to log into the system to do that. It can be in your queue already to go, because it knows when you're in Office, it knows that you're authenticated user to Business Central or Sparkrock, and that allows you to just start working with that information in your accounting system while you're still in Outlook. And then, as we mentioned earlier, being able to truly use more than just the ERP application itself, but that full stack of the Microsoft Cloud solutions. With we talked about the Office 365, but Power BI, which is the world leader in business analytics and reporting and dashboards, being natively integrated and interfaced, so you can have those Power BI dashboards, which a number of them come out of the box, and you can see them right inside of Business Central, or you can run them separately, including via the Power BI mobile app. Power Automate and Power Apps, being able to create workflows and system-specific functionality apps that you maybe are just for a core business process that you have in your organization, being able to create those without any sort of code, just drag and drop sort of form builders, and then have those workflows extend beyond just the accounting system, but being able to use those workflows inside of Office 365, inside of SharePoint, outside of the application in general, using the mobile app. You're not locked into just using that inside the accounting system itself. And then using the App Store for finding other add-ons or quick ISVs to maybe add some additional functionality. And for those of you that have been using ISVs that you really, really like for years, whether that be Solver Power BI is a great example. A lot of Dynamics GP main ISVs that maybe you've used and liked, a number of those continue to work with Business Central, like Solver. It's just a changing where those integrations are pointing to. There's a connector available out of the box for BI 360 to connect to Dynamics 365. You don't have to rebuy and re-implement Solver. It's just a new connector. And at our core, Arctic IT is just part of the puzzle. Arctic IT and Microsoft, share a deep level of partnership that we've been working as a Microsoft Gold partner for years, as the industry experts, delivering the solutions with Dynamics MVPs, where we can even train Microsoft themselves. They will hire us to train them on their own technology just because of our deep experience that we have with it. And as a Alaska Native Corporation, 8A, just having that industry expertise to do that, and then bringing in now our market experts of Sparkrock that have built that software to meet the unique needs of our tribal organizations and nonprofits, where they've been focused on those markets for over a decade. So we're very happy and excited to have Sparkrock as part of the Arctic IT family of products going forward. And to tell you more about it, my new friend Russell Parr is going to be introducing Sparkrock 365 in more detail right now.
Fabulous, thank you, Matt. Our CTO James Ford will be following, but first of all, thank you for the opportunity to introduce Sparkrock to all of you on the call today. And so really, as Matt has been talking, we are the next generation of Microsoft ecosystem platforms and providers to enable you to make a very smooth migration from that Microsoft environment that you've grown to depend upon and really take it to the next level. So I think what you're going to see, and what you've probably seen and heard for quite some time now, is less talk about applications and packages and software tools, and more talk about ecosystems. And Microsoft particularly are very, very big on the idea of an ecosystem. And the reason for that is that we are increasingly connected. When we do things, when we store and manage and use data to make decisions, we don't want to be doing it in silos. We want to be doing it in conjunction with other data sources, other pieces of information, to ensure that we have fast and effective decision making. So we're living in an increasingly connected world, and we want to make sure that those connections are seamless across all of the tools that we use. Increasingly, that's not just us making decisions as well. And this is in some ways it can seem like a slightly scary concept when we think of artificial intelligence as the sci-fi world of machines making decisions for us. But in fact, in the business world, it is right now today making low-level important decisions that make us much more productive. And you're going to see a little bit of that today. You may not even realize how much AI you see and interact with, and the impact that it can have upon the way that you make those decisions and the way that you propel your organizations forward. In order to enable all of that, Microsoft's ecosystem uses a series of advanced integrations, not just between its own applications, but indeed, as Matt said, those external ecosystem partners, and Sparkrock are one of those. But you may well have other ISVs with whom you work, and that enables us to move very seamlessly to give you a roadmap forward and ensure that you don't end anymore in the cycle of purchasing an on-premise solution, keeping it up to date as long as you can, and then a few years later having to once again revisit that purchasing decision, once again have a major upheaval project to migrate, but rather what you now move into is a seamless transition forward with continual updates for that technology. So when you look at the way that our platform is built, we really sit around 4 core elements: finance and procurement, HR management, scheduling and time entry, and payroll administration. And they're separate modules that can be deployed and managed independently, but also work seamlessly together. One of the important things to understand with this is that the data stored beneath it is, as Matt has already explained, that business central engine. So it's a single data store. We're not trying to manage different silos of data and information and trying to ensure that data integrity and data parity between those silos. We're using that single database store to ensure that whether you're an IT manager, whether you're an HR manager or a finance manager or a CFO or a department manager approving expense claims, you're all working in the same data set through the lens and filter of an application designed to give you access to the right information at the right time and the right processes. And you'll see a lot of that through the way that we've built the workflow between all of these different feature sets that you see on the screen right here, enabling somebody to a department manager, for example, to create a time schedule for employees. And so when those employees fulfill that schedule by coming to work and fulfilling their shift, that then moves to payroll to register that they've completed those hours. Those hours are approved and as having been completed, then it moves into finance for payment. The whole thing is seamlessly connected through a single workflow across multiple applications and multiple users. So when we look at GP through Business Central and into Sparkrock 365, there are, as Matt has said already, some natural developments. When we see at the top those updates and upgrades, taking you out of that very manual, very intensive process of having to upgrade an application that sits on your site, but rather updates happen automatically and in a seamless and controlled fashion in such a way as to never create disruption for your organization. And that's done in part because it's hosted on the cloud with all of the benefits that Matt has already talked to. There really is no compelling reason anymore in this day and age to be replacing anything with an on-prem solution in this environment. The value of cloud, particularly when it's operating in Microsoft's Azure cloud environment, is a proven and established value. And I think we're seeing it demonstrated now with the situation that we're going through currently with the pandemic. There's an anecdote that came from one of our customers the other day who said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he said it has not gone unnoticed that his staff who are dependent upon Sparkrock for their everyday working practices are the ones who have most easily made the migration to working from home. And that's a great value statement to that kind of any device, anywhere, location independent, cloud-based working, where the experience you have in the office is exactly the same as the experience you have at home or sitting in Starbucks or in a hotel room, wherever you may be and whatever device you may be using. So the GL has changed to enable us to do more and thus to enable you to do more from a segmented environment that you're used to with GP into far more of a dimensional oriented general ledger. But we do maintain a lot of that or all of that feature set that you've come to know and love and depend upon in GP. We have maintained that functionality because we know that it's important to you. And Business Central takes some of it through as well. So we've highlighted one or two. Budget management is one that we've pulled out. Increasingly, we recognize that for you as business leaders and business managers, the importance of being able to have fast access to live information, to know exactly where you sit right now financially, not where you sat yesterday or where you sat last week or last month. You need to know the position right now in order to make decisions. So we've very much focused on that in our budget management type of models. Matt, let's move to the next one. And so we do also particularly recognize, and I should say that we are not a generalist company, by the way. We don't sell into private enterprise type organizations. We're not a generalist from our technology perspective. We focus very, very much on our core markets, which is education, nonprofit, K-12, and state and local government. And the reason for that is because the very specific requirements of the way that you guys work. When we look at a lot of private enterprise, the focus for an ERP application and for the Dynamics applications is very much on how do I manage the inbound money? How do I manage the generation of funds? How do I manage sales activity? Whereas for the nonprofit, the state and local government, for tribal customers, we recognize that the reverse is very commonly true, that the focus is primarily upon expense management. How do I spend money? How do I effectively account for the money that I'm spending? How do I manage that kind of outflow of money, because my primary purpose is to spend money on my main mission. And so we recognize, therefore, that fund accounting and that encumbrance and commitment accounting are absolutely crucial in the way that you effectively manage your business. Dynamics GP does all of those things to some extent. We feel we've enhanced on that. Business Central doesn't do it at all. We've built that through our dimensional GL structure to give you a very powerful fund and commitment and encumbrance accounting model, to give you all of the grant and project management accounting type tools that you need in order to effectively run your organizations. And payroll is another crucial element. We already touched on it on the tile slide. It links right across our HR piece, but the ability to manage payroll as part of a single joined up ERP solution, rather than doing it using add-ons and additional functions from different vendors and custom pieces, we think it's really important, and our experience has shown with our customers that having that single joined up environment for payroll is absolutely crucial to the enhanced flow of the organization. So I want to touch on a case study, because it's very easy for salespeople to sit on presentations and talk about wonderful features and run through pretty PowerPoint slides. But I think it's really important that we relate this to true organizations and customers truly using it, who have experienced this, and frankly, who drive our development and drive the way that we position our technology every day. We learn from our customers, we take that information from them, and we continue to develop our applications to ensure that we're always a step ahead of where you guys want to be, so that when you need to have something new, something different, we're already developing it. We want to help you to be leaders in that kind of advanced business modeling. So St. John's Ambulance is a customer who came on with us about a year ago. And St. John's Ambulance right across Canada have a lot of sites, a lot of staff, a lot of different chapters, and they were a GP customer, and had loved GP. They'd used it for many years. So when they were looking at their next generation of ERP solution, the first thing they wanted to do was stay within that Microsoft ecosystem. They recognized the importance and the value of being part of that integrated Microsoft suite. They also wanted to be able to take advantage of a much wider set of functionality, just as I was talking about around the joined up finance, HR, and payroll piece. They wanted to be able to do more things from a single pane of glass, a single application stack. And it was particularly important to them that the vendor with whom they worked truly understood and lived the market in which they live. That wasn't an organization that today was selling to a non-profit organization like St. John's Ambulance, but the following day was then selling to an organization that manufactured and distributed bottles for drinks, or whatever it might be. It was important that we had a focus on a core technology and a core market that was harmonious with them. What was important to them was the ability to unify those accounting processes and be able to report much more effectively, to standardize that reporting model, because with lots of different chapters, what they found was that each different chapter would report slightly differently, or report in slightly different ways, because they use slightly different spreadsheets or slightly different methodologies. They wanted to ensure that all of that reporting came across in a standard form from a standard application. And they wanted to get away from running data centers, from running raised floors, from being a hardware operator. They wanted to decommission servers, move their technology into that cloud environment, and know that they could take advantage of the resilience and availability and access anywhere capabilities of the cloud. One could say they were very prescient in the timing of their move, given what we're living through right now, but certainly they're starting to see the real value of having that cloud environment and the business continuity. So at this point, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce James Forr. And so James is our CTO and one of the co-founders of the organization 17 years ago when Sparkrock came into being. And James was involved with the St. John's Ambulance project. So I think perhaps it's a good segue to say, James, do you have any particular experience of that project that's worth sharing before you move into the demo?
Hello, everybody. Thanks very much, Matt and Russell. Yeah, so I know that I spoke recently to James Williamson, who is the head of technology at St. John Ambulance, and he really talks about the concept of flattening the curve, to use sort of something that a concept we're familiar with, but flattening the curve in terms of IT costs, and how a true cloud and SaaS solution can really assist organizations in doing that. So that was his mandate in coming into the organization, is to look to SaaSify sort of the applications that were used across the operations of St. John's Ambulance, and to make sure that their costs were predictable and consistent across. And so I just wanted to sort of go back to those concepts and why the Business Central Microsoft platform and Sparkrock 365 on that is such an important concept. Cloud really refers to the freedom from servers, as Russell mentioned, so the freedom from hardware costs and servers and upgrading. And then, of course, along with that goes the risk of having your data either in-house or at least being responsible for where that data is stored in terms of compliance and data risks. We're seeing lots of threats, cybersecurity threats and things like that out there, targeting specific, state and local government organizations, hospitals, organizations that we connect with. And so on-premise solutions, or where there's data that's perhaps protected and doesn't have the top security experts on the planet working to protect that data, is more vulnerable by default than a solution that's stored in the cloud. And then SaaS really refers to the concept of the continuous, frequent deployment of features. So what Matt mentioned earlier in the conversation about we're used to it on our phones where we get an update with new features, but it's not an update that sort of requires us to get trained on how to use that mobile app, right? They're incremental features that are rolled out with usability in mind, with migration in mind, and so the changes are getting out to you so you can use the new features, but they're not disruptive in terms of a full upgrade project. So just wanted to check in. Hopefully you can see my screen here. I'd like to start to walk you through what some of that looks like in Sparkrock 365. So this is Sparkrock 365. So it is built on a Microsoft platform. So when you look at it, it's part of Microsoft. It's a sister product to all the products in the Microsoft Office family of products. So you can see that it is giving users a sort of that Microsoft look and feel. So I can navigate the same way that I navigate through Microsoft Office applications with the menus across the top. I can look at information, and I just happen to click on want to learn more about your Sparkrock solution, and that takes us to our customer success center, where you can find more information and search through content. So again, there's a nice layout here of the application that allows you to look through information in the way that you need to. And then the other part of the solution is really translating data. So in today's day and age, the goal for a lot of modern ERP solutions is really to translate the volumes of data that we're collecting and make meaning out of those. And so the intent is so that a user logs into the system and they can get insight into the health of their organization right up front. So I can see how many overdue purchase invoices are in my organization here in my demonstration company, the total of my cash account balances, if I want to monitor that, how many incoming documents. So this ties into the concept that Russell mentioned of integration to AI and AP automation. So incoming documents are documents that we can image just through a scan to email, an email to scan function, and they go into a cloud service that actually pre-enters part or all of the invoice for us and attaches those documents back in our system. So that's what these new incoming documents, there's 9 in there. There's a few in different statuses here, approved 5 of them and OCR complete 0 right now, but I can see sort of where they are in the workflow in our solution. And then down here, I can see some other things like the invoices due today, next week, or discounts that I would get if I were to process them in the next week, POs pending approval, sales documents pending approval if I have those, unprocessed payments, even requisitions or even approvals that I have here in the system. And this is all tied into the workflows. And Sparkrock has extended the workflows. So these workflows, in this case, you can see there's some absence requests here. There's some time entry approvals. There can be requisition approvals. They can be expense claim approvals. All of those go into one sort of inbox for users. And those users can access them from any device anywhere. So Matt mentioned earlier, and I think you saw some screenshots of the mobile interface, tablet interface. This is truly the modern world where you can choose whatever device you want to work with, and you can do your journal entries or calculate payroll even on your phone if you need to. I know none of us are really wanting to sort of work more than we already are, but especially in today's day and age, it's easy to understand the importance of having flexibility for when and where you can access the solution. So this is some basic information. Now, I wanted to highlight a few other things. So if we go into the chart of accounts, Sparkrock 365 really understands, as Russell mentioned, sort of how our customers and tribal organizations and nonprofits really function. There is revenue complexity, but unlike for-profit organizations, there's also a lot of complexity in the expense side, and in some cases that's where the majority of the complexity is. So if I go to let's say program expenses or programs, a program section of my chart of accounts, I can look at all of these accounts here: program supply, staffing, travel, all of that, and I can drill down on these amounts here. So first of all, you can see that I've got my total budget, I've got my pre-commitments and my commitments, or commitments and encumbrances here, that are showing me expenses that are coming up. I haven't spent this money yet, but I'm tying up the funds because I want to have a very accurate budget check. And then the actual, these are expenditures that have already happened, and then there's a budget available calculation. So this is available in real time in the system simply by clicking on a line. And we can present it again. We understand that some users can, digest graphical information more than just numeric. So we're presenting it sort of in whatever way that you want, or I can, easily hide this panel to see more information. I can also, just to give you a sense of how connected and easy it is to navigate through the system, if I drill down on these entries, I'm seeing a lot of transaction detail. Now, this might be quite a bit. So let me narrow it down a little bit more, and I'm going to zero in. I'm going to do a spot check on a department, and I'm going to pick my information technology department. I'm just going to apply a filter here to this department. And I can see here all of the transactions. Now we're providing users with the total at the bottom here of everything that's within your filter. So just like highlighting a row in Excel to get that filter, you can do that. Also, I'm going to click on the amount column here twice to sort it in descending order, and I can see here my largest expenses. So if I want to do a materiality analysis, I can take a look at the largest expenses first. Now I'm going to skip down to this one here, this invoice here for program supplies. That's an accounts payable entry. So I can actually click on navigate, and that searches through the entire application. It filters the results that it gets based on my security permissions. So it's not going to show me things that I don't have access to. It's simply going to show me transactions that I do have access to through my permissions, and it gives me those results. So I can see here I've got a posted purchase invoice, GL entries, vendor ledger entries, and if I can show that posted purchase invoice, I can see that here and show the invoice voucher. If this were entered with that AI functionality and there were an incoming document image, I can see it here. Or if I've added other attachments, I can see those attachments here, that there's 2 of them, and I can, take a look at the that particular transaction, open up the image of that document. But just to give you a sense of the connectedness of the solution and those expenses, if I go back to my general ledger here, and maybe I select sort of the salary earnings transaction on the top here, because these are all program related entries, including salaries and others. I can look at the GL detail. So you can see here that I'm looking at, maybe payroll ledger entries or deduction ledger entries or compensation ledger entries, and I can access those and see the drill down details for that, including the employee name, again, if I have security permission to access this. So if you're doing analysis on your costs and whether those costs are coming in through a procurement cycle or they're coming in through payroll, which are the 2 major ways that costs come in, we're able to provide your users with visibility that's deep and right into the details. Now, one of the things that our experience has shown for customers in our segment is that another key part of how they operate is really this idea of a distributed method for managing budget. So I'm just going to log into a different role center that I've got set up here. And that means that, in a for-profit organization, often the budget is managed by just a few people in the finance department, let's say. But for our customers, many of them manage it in such a way that is very distributed. You may have a couple individuals in charge of some departments, or somebody else in charge of a program, or a few people in charge of just a few specific grants. So we've built from the ground up a security layer and an entire role center dedicated around those types of users. So those users can log into the system and they can see some specific transactions that are filtered where the data is filtered. So for example, I can look at posted purchase invoices. I can look at a list of all invoices that are posted, and this invoice will be filtered based on only items that are posted to the department or the grant or the program or a combination of some of those elements that I have security access to. to. Even if I have commingled lines on a single document, I can see the document here, and when I open up the document, I will only see the lines that I have access to. The same applies to requisitions and payment request, expense claims. I can see all of those here, POs as well. And then I also have the ability for users to look up their own account sets and look up actual to budget for those. So if they're more proactive in doing that, then they can do that here as well. I wanted to quickly give you, by way of contrast, a view into another role center here. So I'm quickly going to switch this role center to give you a perspective on an HR manager and what their user experience is like. So I can switch over, and if I'm an HR user, then I'll have access to a lookout and look and feel that's very similar to what we saw in finance, but completely different data. Where I'm looking at FTEs and leaves and absence requests, timesheets, those sorts of things. I can look at active FTE by HR department in my analysis here. Tasks, absences, all of those sorts of things, grievances if you have unionized workforce, overdue appraisals, all of those sorts of things with highlights onto my employees, the employees that I need to follow as an HR manager. So again, we have a deep and rich functionality all integrated into a single application database where the data is shared across. So even if you have workflows, for example, that are in finance around approvals for a specific department, those workflows, instead of being pointed specifically at a specific user, and then if there's turnover with that user, you have to go and find every reference to them and change it to somebody else, that's tied into, you can have those workflows point to a position. And if you do that, then any incumbent in that position will be automatically the one used for the approval. So if there's changeover or even overlap in incumbents in a managerial position that is set up on a workflow for approval for a particular department in finance, that gets updated automatically. So there's some tremendous benefits to having that all in one place. Now, some of the other benefits are really tied to the integration with the Microsoft ecosystem. So with this solution, as part of a Microsoft solution, there are many places where it's deeply integrated with other solutions within that Microsoft family. So again, Matt mentioned the Power Apps and the Common Data Service. So this solution fits into that framework and really opens up a huge number of options. If you have other solutions using Dynamics CE or Dynamics CRM or one of the other solutions from Microsoft, then you can leverage those and leverage that integration framework. Another one is Power BI, and you can see here that I've got a Power BI dashboard, and this solution has a bi-directional integration with Power BI, meaning that you can expose data. There's just an assisted setup, essentially a wizard that will allow you to set up data from this solution and allow it to connect into Power BI. And then also there is that you can also pull in and show dashboards in the solution that are from Power BI dashboards as well. So you can see either way how there's that deep integration, that bi-directional integration with Power BI. So if you have, let's say, Power BI dashboards that are showing you program information or information from Dynamics CE or maybe some other application altogether, you can actually present those dashboards directly within your solution here, and select from multiple reports right here inside your solution. So another aspect that I wanted to show you of that integration is the ability to look at data. And whenever data is editable, then we can either push it out to Excel or edit it in Excel. So I know we're running a little low on time here, so I'll just show you very quickly how, this vendor list here, I can either open it in Excel or I can even edit it in Excel. And when I do that, it allows me to download that data, make mass changes to that data if I need to. So let's say there's a changeover in all the buyers in this particular department and I need to reassign a bunch of vendors to a new buyer, for example. I can quickly do that with this solution. And update, refresh that data, and then push those changes back into the system. So it's just taking a moment the first time I connect here for it to download that, but you'll see there it's downloaded all my vendors here. And if I find that data. Here, let's say I'm reassigning a bunch of vendors that are here. I'm just going to assign more of them to John Roberts down here. I can quickly do that and publish those changes back into the application, and it's processed those 9 changes. Again, if I go back into my vendor list and just kind of go out and back in, then you'll see in a second how more of them have John Roberts on them. So that's a tremendous advantage. I know this is a super simple example here. You can see a bunch more of John Roberts on them here. That's a tremendous advantage for doing mass edits and changes to data, and shows you. That feature also exists with journal entries, where you can actually start a journal entry in our solution and then transfer it to Excel, continuing using that edit to Excel, and publish the changes back. So one final change that I wanted to show you about that Microsoft framework is really, first of all, that our application kind of shows up inside the Microsoft Office waffle. This, a little 9-dot image here is, I've heard it referred to as the waffle, the Office 365 waffle. So you can click on that, and I can see other Microsoft Office applications, including Outlook. And Microsoft has done some amazing things in terms of connecting this application with other solutions like Outlook. So for example, I've associated James Faw here, which happens to be me, but I've associated my email address with a user in our application. And so you can turn on something called Contact Insights inside your Outlook inbox. And when you do this, I'm going to pin it here. And again, it just takes a moment the first time I connect in. But when I do this, it looks into my ERP application. It looks for any content that has that email in it. It looks for what record they're associated with, in this case, a vendor record, and it presents back insights to me as a user right within my email. And so it's showing me that I'm associated with First Up Consultants, and I can see some things like the vendor balances here. I can scroll down and see the aged accounts payable for that vendor. I can see, how many documents in the history. I can add new links or notes right inside the ERP application. And this is like a mini window into the application. So I can even drill down on these to see what makes them up. So here's the 3 invoices that make up that balance, or I can drill back out here. Or again, I can also start entering a purchase order directly from here. So if I'm interacting with this vendor about some pricing, it can start entering the purchase order. And even further, it uses some AI technology to look for a match on items, which I can either use, or if that's not the right item that it matched on, just based on its reading through the email, I can say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and enter this purchase order from scratch. And so I can choose to accept or not accept that, and go ahead and enter the PO from here. So some really amazing things about the integration between Office and Sparkrock 365 that we're able to leverage, but we're combining that with all the deep feature set that we know doesn't exist in the Business Central platform and is needed for our customers who are in the nonprofit, public sector, tribal organizations, and nonprofits, and make sure that you have everything you need, especially if you're migrating from Dynamics GP and are already using some of those features. So hopefully this provides you with some insight into Sparkrock 365 and a little bit about what it can do. So I'm going to pass things back to Matt.
Yes, that was a great presentation. James, thank you for giving us a great sneak peek and walk through what it looks like to be inside Sparkrock 365 and the great functionality that offers. So as we mentioned earlier, where we're not really sure what that future of Dynamics GP is, you're being ready ahead of the curve to future-proof your organization now, so you're not kind of left behind the 8 ball in trying to figure out that solution when Microsoft does decide to move on, or for the next time you're in a situation where your business needs to ensure that continuity of application access, regardless of where you are, or what's going on in your region or in a country. Continuing to rely on Arctic IT as your trusted ERP technology partner, and just seeing that Sparkrock 365 is the right choice for tribal organizations and nonprofit organizations as that next ERP option from Dynamics GP.
Matt, we did have a few questions that came in.
Perfect.
So the first question is, how is AR tracked in the cloud version? Does it still use balance forward accounts because the aging does not work well with those?
Well, in Dynamics GP as well, there is a configuration options to not use balance forward accounts. But for if you have been using those and you like those, whether you want to move to maintaining all that transaction history and not rolling balances forward, while that wouldn't be our first choice, you do still have that option in Dynamics 365. But we would recommend moving away from that, as maintaining that transaction history has never been more important than it is now, and the cloud infrastructure allows you to continue to do that without additional costs or processing burden that balance forward may be assisted with in a legacy environment.
Okay, and how does the conversion from GP 2016 to 365 work, specifically the GL conversion?
That's a great question. Microsoft has done a great job of creating some automated conversion tools. And so in that, as you're moving, if you chose to go with that dimensional structure as Dynamics 365, as Sparkrock offers, you essentially map the segments from your GP general ledger to the segments, to the dimensions that are configured inside of Dynamics 365. So when you run that cloud migration tool that comes with it, you perform that mapping, and we assist with that. And then it not only brings across your chart of accounts as they are, but it also brings over transactional balances. So you have that history of balances that have recorded in your general ledger, so you can start day one with having reports with that historical information in it. But those same tools, the same migration tool, will help bring over customers and AR transactions, vendors and AP transactions, and they're continuing to make enhancements for that to include things like open unreconciled bank transactions, open purchase orders, things like that, as to help speed up that migration process using automated tools. So you don't have to worry about exporting and importing and all that too much.
Okay, and how secure is my data on Sparkrock 365?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, so Sparkrock 365, we're simply leveraging the Microsoft infrastructure, the same infrastructure that hosts Business Central. So that is, it's infrastructure that Microsoft is managing. So your data is managed by Microsoft themselves, and it's highly secure. It's all on Azure using SQL Azure, so SQL as a service behind the scenes. Again, that's transparent to the end user. You don't need to worry or think about that, but it is using SQL Azure in high availability mode. So it's typically geo-redundant across 2 different geographies, and with security in terms of the encryption for data at rest and encryption for data in transit. So those are typically the primary areas of concern when talking about security, is sort of how the data is stored and encrypted and sort of where it is and what sort of redundancy. So hopefully that addresses those. We can provide you with more information on that as well if necessary.
And a great resource out there is the Microsoft Trust Center, that it's called. That's where Microsoft publishes all of their Azure security certifications and all that. And the truth is, when it comes to meeting and exceeding the highest levels of certification out there, Microsoft is at the forefront. Their data center leads the world in a number of certifications met, and pretty much all of them that would adhere or that we would want for our tribal nonprofit customers, Microsoft has met and exceeded. And all that information is on the Trust Center. Like James said, if it comes down to that, you have some detailed questions with IT, we'd be happy to provide that information and talk through that in depth.
Okay, and I guess we can get one quick question in. What is the typical timeline for migrating from GP to Sparkrock 365?
Yeah, so it depends on the scope, but typically the elapsed time is about maybe anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months or so, depending on the complexity of the scope, how much revamping of the data you're doing, so and the availability of your resources. So, and Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add to that too. So.
Yeah, great question, and I agree with that. Because there's a number of modules, as you saw earlier, for those that are focused more on the core financials, AP, AR, fund accounting, procurement, that side of things. Those things tend to be on that 2 to 3 month timeline, when you're bringing in HR and payroll and extending those things out further, or especially if you're using modules and new functions that you're not using in GP right now, that's where it might stick under more of that 6 months timeline. And sometimes it makes sense to phase those in, where maybe we're doing financials and then doing HR and payroll, and we work through you to scope that out depending upon the level of, and to plan for that depending upon the number of modules we're talking about.
Okay, well, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. And thank you for joining us, everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up. You are familiar with Matt Borkowski or myself, Joanne Maltagliati. Reach out to us and we can answer your questions. With that, have a wonderful day.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.